Hello, I'm Jeremy Myerson. I'm the director of WORKTECH Academy, and I'm the research professor at the Royal College of Art. I hold the Helen Hamlyn Chair of Design, and it's my pleasure to welcome to the conference Mike Pilcher, the Chief Sales Officer of Condeco. Mike sits on the Global Leadership Board at Condeco, has a background in software, and Mike is right on the front line of seeing how companies are responding to the pandemic and what technology and innovation can do to create this new landscape of work that we're all talking about. So Mike, welcome. Good to have you at the conference. I think the first thing to ask you, I mean, you joined Condeco in August 2019. You had a good 9 months with the customer base, enterprise companies around the world. How do you think their priorities have changed before and after the pandemic?
Well, I think it's been a fundamentally different change. It's a paradigm shift in what we're seeing. And our core business pre-pandemic was around complex meeting spaces at scale, but around largely customer-focused areas and managing small segments of the workspace. And the reason that was the case is because many people have fixed desks and fixed offices. Now, during the pandemic, and for what we see going forward, we see that fundamentally changing. The concept of coming in 5 days a week, sitting at the same desk, sitting in the same office has fundamentally changed. We've seen. I think we've got people on either extremes. We've got the likes of Goldman Sachs at one end saying nothing's going to change, everything's going to go back to the way it was, and then we've got people at the other extreme of Facebook saying, everyone's just going to be roaming the wilds of home office and the office whenever they choose, however they choose. And overall, my belief is I think we're going to see something somewhere in the middle. But that in the middle is fundamentally different. It's not a sort of a shade of grey between the black and white of a Goldman Sachs and a Facebook, because it's fundamentally different from having a fixed desk. One of the things I'll talk to about people when they'll be talking about embracing change, you say, well, you do realise if you're going to be working remotely 2 to 3 days a week, you don't have a fixed desk when you come in anymore. And people go, what? Well, no, because I've got a fixed desk. I've spent 10 years getting that corner desk by the window because it's great, and I love having my pictures of my husband and kids on the desk. And I'll say, well, it's great, but you can't have that empty 3 days a week. Right? And if somebody else is using it, you realise they want pictures of their wife and kids there too. So that's probably not going to work now, is it? And you sort of see them do the mental trade of how am I going to feel about the fact that I've lost that spot versus the fact they want the flexibility of working remotely. So I think it is a paradigm shift brought on, and I also think there's a more human element to it than I think we generally are embracing. And I was living in the US when 9/11 hit, and that's the closest thing I've come to when people have said to me, "What are the changes you've seen?" You say it was also said, and kindly, that I've been in the technology business for a while. I've been in the technology business for a long while, and I've sort of lived through the financial impact of things before, recessions. They have a similar sort of feel for them. They feel really bad at the time. People react to them. There are cost cutting. There's changes in business. But we all know it's going to finish at some point. How it's going to finish, we don't know, but we do know there's an end in sight. And it hits you personally if you lose your job, but outside of that, it's not very personal. 9/11, I really noticed that there was a really fundamental difference. There was the economic impact of it. There was clearly the impact similar that we've got today on transport. But the personal, it hit people personally. Everybody knew someone or knew someone who knew someone. And especially in the US, where traveling is like taking a bus, it hit people. Suddenly they stopped getting on planes to go places, and they stopped going on vacation. They stopped getting virtually all business travel stopped for 3 to 4 months just because nobody wanted to get on a plane. And to me, that's the most similar the thing that we're seeing here. There's more of a sort of an existential, personal impact on this. And I think that's causing, it's not just business that's changing, it's the people that are changing within the business, and how are they responding to this, and what does it mean to them if they no longer have a fixed desk? And will they make that trade of
Yeah.
I haven't got a fixed desk anymore because I like working remotely because I'm more productive when I do that. So I think it's from an intellectual perspective, it's deeply fascinating because it's hitting economically and it's hitting people personally.
Yeah, I think you raise some very interesting points. I mean, clearly, the people who think they're going to have their own desk, even when they come in randomly to the office a couple of days a week, they don't understand the meaning of the term paradigm shift.
Indeed.
But I mean, there's a very interesting debate going on right as we speak about working cultures. I mean, the Goldman Sachs, the 13 junior bankers who have leaked this piece of research, really have put a spoke in the wheel of the kind of, the back to how it was before brigade, if I could put it. Because Goldman Sachs was saying we're going back to the workplace, we're having the same old long hours culture that we had before, everyone in the office very early, going home very late, and actually they're saying it's as though the pandemic never happened. And then there's another group, I mean, the Financial Times today, the chief executive of Citibank was saying, no, we're going to change our culture. And I think the issue, and that's why I'm so interested to hear your perspectives, Mike. The issue is, how do companies navigate this change? And I think that looking around the WORKTECH network around the world, that's the big question at the moment, is how you navigate change. And I'm interested to know how technology and can help transform the workplace, and what that journey might look like.
Well, I think it's multifaceted in terms of change, and because you're changing people's personal behaviours and the way that they've used to act, but you're also changing the physical workspace. And again, I think the idea that you might have the general number I hear when I'm talking to customers is around 40%. Of change in the number of people coming into the office. You used to come in 5 days a week, you're going to come in 3 days a week. The concept that is going to not have an impact on real estate in some fashion, I think is naive. Now, it might be a redesign of the workspace, it might be a reduction in the amount of workspace, but you're not going to have people coming in 40% less time and using exactly the same space the way they did before, because it'll be like a prairie with lots of empty desks. You'll lose socialization, you'll lose collaboration, because there'll just be people sitting further apart from each other. So I think you've got that physical change. And from a technology perspective, the way that we look at it from Condeco is, what that means you need to do is digitize every aspect of the work space that you use. So that's not just the desk, it's the things on the desk, it's the proximity of that desk to somebody else's desk. Because if you used to come in every day and you sit in the marketing department and you knew that in marketing I was always going to be sitting opposite you, some days you might be in, some days you wouldn't, but when you were in, we'd always be next to each other. Okay, that works from a collaboration perspective. If there's now 40% fewer desks because you still want people to be close to each other when they're in, we now need to start to understand, where are you going to be? Where am I going to be? Are we going to be proximate or are we not? Because if we got used to being in 5 days a week and collaborating 3 days a week because we were close to each other, and now we're in 3 days a week but we're sitting in opposite ends of the office, we're not going to run across each other. We're not going to get that spark, that water cooler moment that people are searching for. So from Condeco's perspective, there's the digitization of the physical space. Is it a desk? Okay. Is it a desk? Is it a desk near Jeremy? That's important. I'm in marketing and I work in the design team. I need high fidelity screens, and I don't have high fidelity screens at home. I've got a high fidelity laptop, but I actually need a large format 4K screen. Well, I need to digitize that, because I can't come in the office to do that work on a 4K screen. I need to turn up, find out there's not a 4K screen available to me. I might be in finance, I might need twin screens because I'm working on planning and budgeting. Again, I book to come in the office, I commute my hour to an hour and a half a day, and I turn up and there's only a laptop screen for me. I might as well have stayed remote. So it's the digitization of all of the aspects of the space, the attributes of that space. It could be a meeting room. Does it have video capability? How many people does it sit? Is it possible to put catering into that space? All of those different things. One of the ones that came up recently with a customer, we will book parking spaces for people. There's parking is usually finite. People want to come in the office, especially during the pandemic. They didn't want to use public transport, but they want EV parking because they've got an EV. They don't want to drive to the office, especially in somewhere like the US, where traveling to the office might only take you half an hour, but you might have gone 70, 80 miles. You need to make sure when you get there you can recharge your car. So now I need to book my EV parking, and now I need to tie all of that together. I've booked my EV parking. I need to book my desk near Jeremy. I need to book the meeting room that's going to accommodate the meeting I'm coming in for. And the only way you can do that is to digitize it all and to digitize all the attributes of those things and make it easy to search, easy to find, easy to book, and then easy to change. Because actually, I came in to see you, Jeremy. You've needed to move it because you've had an urgent meeting, and we need to move this from Tuesday to next Thursday, and all of those other things need to flow. Because even if it sounds trivial on the EV parking, if I was counting on it, I moved my whole day to another day, but it turns out I don't have an EV space. I've got a brick, not a usable car to get me home. So from our perspective, where we see technology driving it is digitizing every aspect of the space so that it becomes a mobile first experience, a world in which we're all very used to living on our phones, and very easy to navigate that space and navigate the use of that space.
So these smart systems that you talk about, I mean, how does that play out in practical terms? How does that feel? I mean, I'm talking to, a lot of company leaders who make precisely your point, Mike, that they're worried that the office is going to be a morgue. A few people will come in and it'll be a terrible atmosphere and a bad experience. So they're really scrambling to try and curate the experience so that the right people come in at the right time and have the space right sized for them. Otherwise, it's not going to be an optimum experience. And it's almost like event scheduling or event planning. What are companies talking to you about? What are their kind of fears and hopes in terms of improving the experience?
Well, they're trying to do exactly what you said. Is how do I make sure if I've got if Mike and Jeremy are going to be moved down to 2 and 3 days a week respectively, but they're in the same team, how do I make sure that you don't come in Monday to Wednesday and I come into Thursday and Friday and our paths never cross? How do we make sure that if we're trying to get our paths to cross because we're in the operations team, that the operations team are only ever in the office together and they're never in the office with the sales team? And actually, you still get cross-fertilization of ideas and experiences. So, but by having both of those folk in the office. So, and this is fortunate for Condeco because we'd already built this into our technology as I discussed in the pre-pandemic era around the complexity of how do I understand who people are, what their function is, how do I bring them together, what are the workflow rules I need to put in place that say, pre-pandemic, if we were planning for this, we might have said, we're going to make a change to the office. Okay, all the people in finance are going to be in 4 days a week. That'll be Monday to Thursday, and we're going to allow all the people in marketing to be in 4 days a week. That's going to be Tuesday to Friday, and we're going to solve the capacity of Tuesday to Thursday, be a bit busy by having the sales team only come in on Monday to Friday, and now we've solved it. I would say a year ago when we first started to talk to customers about what they were thinking about what the world looked like in the new normal, that would be what they would say. I think it's got a lot more nuance than that. Now they're talking to us, and again, it's good for us because we can do this with Condeco, but it's much more nuanced. Okay, we want marketing to be in unless 4 days a week, unless that person has been with the company less than a year. Then we want them to assimilate the culture, so they want them in 5 days a week. Or they've been with the company more than a year, but they've just transferred from operations to sales. So again, we want them in 5 days a week to get what they can from the wider team. But now they've been here 6 months, we want them to only be in a few days a week. And then when they've been here a year and they've been in the role for a year, then they can take the profile of this person. And then different regions. In APAC, there might be government regs that say, oh, actually, we want people to, that encourage people to be in the office 5 days a week. You might be in Boston and be running the insurance team, and you're totally fine with your marketing team being remote 2 days a week. But you're in New York and you're running the commercial finance team, and you want them in, they're all ex-Goldman, so you want them in 5 days a week. Having the business rules to do that, and then to have the intelligence, and it's using the data that we have in the system, and then using AI to start to say, okay, I'm happy for Mike and Jeremy to be 3 and 2 days a week, but I do want them to meet at least twice a month. So I want them to intersect. So I'll make suggestions, and then I'll make mandates. I'll make a suggestion. Hey, Mike, do you know that you're not in the office this week with Jeremy? If you moved your meeting on Thursday to your meeting on Wednesday, you and Jeremy could get together. That might be a suggestion. And then in a month's time, it might be you guys haven't met in a whole month. We want you to make the point of spending some time together. So it's using the power of the tech, the power of digitizing, and then the power of the data to then start to power AI, power machine learning to say, this is how we're going to get the fear you described of having people who are worried I've got a wild prairie where nobody ever meets, is to use that data to say, let's get together, let's collaborate, let's work together.
Yeah, that is a really big shift in mindset for companies and for business leaders and for team leaders to understand that. It's interesting to see how far along the journey companies are, and presumably they're all at different stages of the journey. They're very spaced out. Some are at the start. Absolutely. Some are very advanced.
And I think you see that we have noticed some industry reflection in how people are thinking. And initially, with the data we got from our customer base was about 15% were going to go down the. I feel sorry for Goldman's now because I'm going to say the Goldman's model. It's forever going to become the Goldman's model. Down that Goldman's model, and we sort of intellectually challenged it. So no, it's a whole new normal. Change is going to be the new normal. It's going to be a dynamic and an agile market, and they're just in the past. They don't realize. And we actually uncovered it, dug in a bit further. The commonality we saw in a number, at least a fair slug of the 15%, was they were creative industries. So they were in media. We were talking to people. Yeah, we've got our writers coming in. They're coming into the space. We want them to work together. They're going to be in a writer's room. They're coming together for film production. Okay, that makes total sense. I mean, we've all seen TV shows where people have tried to do it during the pandemic. It's a bit clunky. So yeah, there's some people where we see that change, where we see them not changing, and that from a business perspective makes total sense. What our belief is that it'll be two things that will help businesses power the change. It'll be the ease of use and the adoption, which is one of the reasons Condeco is in a mobile first mentality, because people are used to using their mobile, and it's similar to things we would do on in an app basis. If you start adding value to the process, you'll trade some of what might feel otherwise slightly invasive. You're in my how do you know that I haven't seen Jeremy in 4 weeks? That's I don't like the fact that you're looking at my data and suggesting a meeting. And I remember I remember I had an Uber moment some years ago where and it'll be interesting to know if the audience have noticed this too. But there was a change a while back when Uber started to notice what time I was searching for a car, and where I was at the time that I did it. And I knew that because I used to travel a lot pre-pandemic, and it started suggesting, did I want to go to Heathrow Terminal 5? And I'm like, why would you know that? And then I noticed, I actually particularly noticed because I was at a restaurant at a particular time, and it suggested I wanted to go somewhere else. And how could you know that? Okay, because you've looked at my prior trips, you've looked at the time of day, you've looked at the location, and initially I was a little uncomfortable, and then this is actually easy. I'm not having to type a search bar in. It's popping up 3 suggestions. It's great. So you buy into it. And I think that's what we'll see. Make it easy for the consumer, the user, your employee to engage with that experience, make it add value to their experience, and then that's how you'll bring them on the cultural journey.
So thus far, Mike, we've talked globally around these kind of trends and the digital transformation. I'd like to focus you a little bit now on the APAC region. And it's quite clear that some governments in the region are mandating workplace safety. I know that in Singapore, they've had various regulations around only opening up to 50% of employees for a maximum of 50% of their working hours. And 42 companies have been issued fines for breaking workplace safety. So this kind of complicates the return to the office. We've talked about the value of a kind of connected, synchronized new office, bringing in the right people at the right time. But then you've got this complication. You know, the return to the office is actually a pain point for a lot of companies. So what do you suggest in this area, and what do you see happening in the region?
Well, at the risk of sort of sounding like I'm just promoting Condeco, but it's business rules. It's how do we take the business rules that the local governments are pushing onto business for very laudable reasons, and very laudable reasons that, or understandable reasons that they're different. The pandemic has hit different regions in different ways. It's very appropriate to have different government guidelines and different business rules in different areas. But embedding that into the software, embedding that into how you manage your workspace, how you manage the workplace that sits around the workspaces, and how you put the people at the center of that experience. From a Condeco perspective, we see that as relatively simple problem to manage. We clearly can't manage an R rate that's burning out of control, which is going to cause people to say, only have people in 50% of the time. What we can do is give you the software to make sure that you only allow 50% of the people to come into the building. We can connect confirmations that you've had your test to allow you to book a space. We can force you, based on geolocation, to confirm before you check into that space that you've had a clean test in 24 hours, and we can limit the amount of people that can come into the building. So to me, that's just a very technology, to your point earlier about how to use technology, that's a very technological solution. It's what technology is built for, is to sort of manage workflows and processes. And I must admit, the drive towards digitization always makes me smile, because I have been in the software industry for a long time, and it always makes me scratch my head. It's like, well, back in the day when we were selling mainframes, if we weren't digitizing things, what were we doing? And what are you doing when you're digitizing things? You're putting it in a bits and bytes format that allow you to then control it some way or another. So I think having those government overlays, having a need to have different overlays in Australia than you have in Singapore, than you have in Thailand, is exactly the same as I was talking about earlier, where I might in a new normal have business rules that say, in the Boston office, I want the marketing team to be in 3 days a week, but in the Sydney office, I want them to be in 2 days a week. I need differing business rules based upon the local market needs, whether those local market needs are driven through a rising R rate and government control, or they're driven through a local culture that is more an in-person culture, or the desires and drives of the person running the Australian operation over the person running the American operation. I think we need flexibility within this. It's not yes, the pandemic has hit us globally. Yes, we are in many cases global businesses, but that doesn't mean we don't have local needs.
Well, for our viewers, please put your questions in the chat, and the Condeco team in the region will be on hand to answer your queries and questions. Because Mike, you're giving us quite a challenging and compelling vision of the future. And my reflection on this is that we're seeing the workplace cross the Rubicon from a kind of hardware-driven environment. I remember the dominance of office furniture systems and wire management and cabling, and gradually, and we've reached a kind of inflection point where this is a software-driven workplace going forward. So, I mean, my question to you is, what advice would you give companies who are just beginning the journey? I know you work with some very sophisticated organizations who are quite well advanced, but what about people who are making the faltering first steps?
I spent 10 years of my career in Silicon Valley, and I'm a big fan of some of the luminaries there. And I'm Mark Andreessen statement, "Software is eating the world," I think is I would encourage them to embrace it. Not just because I've been in the software industry for 30 years, but because I think he's absolutely right. And we're moving to a world in which the digitization of everything, the appification of everything, the Uberization, to ruin the English language in three made up words, but that's just happening, and you can resist it or you can embrace it. And I think the advice would be, as difficult as it might feel, embracing it. It will get you to where you want to get to faster. And I also would say, really similar to what I just said to you about digitization from 30 years ago and before that, IBM bringing out the early mainframes and then minis in the 60s and 70s. This has been going on for an awfully long time. The digitization isn't anything new. It feels new because we're talking about, to your point about, it's not hardware driven, it's software driven. It's not furniture, it's physical space, it's the digitization of that space. But that's just an extension of the digitization of your financial accounts. They used to be done on a pen and paper in a ledger. That you let go of that a long time ago. Yeah. This is just the next step in that journey. And so realize that you as a business, if you look back 50 years ago, 30 years ago, 10 years ago, you've digitized an awful lot of your business. This is just the next bit. It might feel, because it's a building and I can touch it and I can walk into it and it surrounds me. Whereas if it was a ledger, it was a piece of paper, or in my early days, a CRM system like Salesforce was a pack of 5x8 cards and a file of fax. Right? We've digitized that. No one's carrying a file of fax around anymore. So realize that you've already started this journey. Realize that digitization you've already done infinitely more digitization than you could possibly imagine. So embrace it quickly and take advantage of it, because one of the things that we're seeing increasingly is businesses starting to pivot. And I think what you said earlier is exactly what you saw Citibank do. Goldman's came out and said something. Citibank said, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're going to be in a more attractive place to work. We care more about our employees. And I think if you're sitting there as somebody entering the workplace in the next 5 or 10 years, and you've got a choice between working for a Goldman's or a Citi, and Goldman's are saying inflexible working policy, coming in 5 days a week, no autonomy, and Citi is saying totally flexible, you work where you're going to be the most productive, we're going to encourage you to come in and collaborate and socialize, but we're going to trust you to make the right decision. We're also going to help you. We're going to give you some AI, some data to guide you in the way of the right decision. And you had those two jobs, and they're both paying the same, and they're both on Wall Street. I think you're going to choose the Citibank job. So trying to hold back the tide, being the king canoe of the digital age, I would advise against, and I would say embrace it, and look at it from an opportunity perspective rather than why is this going to be a challenge? Yes, there are challenges. There are cultural challenges. Getting Jeremy to give up his office. I literally had this conversation with a customer recently. I'm going to have to go to my executives and tell them I'm going to give up. They're going to give up their offices. You don't have to, but it's worth questioning why some real estate on Fifth Avenue is going to be empty 3 days a week just because they like having their name on the door. You can do what you like, but I think the CFO is going to have something to say about keeping it empty 5 days a week. So I would say embrace it, but I do that with the caveat of I am a fan of Andreessen, and I do believe he's right. Software is eating the world.
One of the great quotes, but I think post-pandemic, I think it's coming true. Mike, it's been a great pleasure. Mike Pilcher of Condeco, sharing a vision of the connected future office, an office that is reflective of a paradigm shift. And it's been fascinating to get your insights as you talk to large enterprise companies around the world. And this conversation that we've had is part of a year-long program called Condeco Conversations between WORKTECH Academy and Condeco, talking to organizations around the world about next steps as we move towards a new workplace. So my thanks to Mike for sharing his thoughts today. And now back to the conference.